I'm Joe Gorman, the president of the Finneytown Civic Association. This is our 26th annual Meet the Candidates Night. It's always an exciting venture. And I want to introduce a couple of board members from our Finneytown Civic Association. Nancy McGuire in the back. She's our membership queen. Robin Henley, she's our liaison to the township. Greg Hopkins, he's our videographer tonight, long-term board member. Chris Offrey, who is basically in charge of this event tonight. He always puts it together. Anybody else? Nick? Anyway, it's a great opportunity for us here in Finneytown to get together and meet our candidates, school board tonight, and also for Springfield Township trustee. And we will have the League of Women Voters will be here later on to give us a pretty quick, I hope quick, synopsis of the state issues that we have before us. So a lot of excitement, I think, tonight. We're going to start off with the school board candidates for the Finneytown school system, if you want to come up. And while they come up, I want to explain how we're working tonight. If you get a chance for questions, please write your question on the card for us. Give it to Nancy in the back there, and she'll give it to me. And we'll choose, questions from the cards. Hopefully, if you got a good question, we'll use it. And let's see, the candidates will have a couple minutes to introduce themselves, at least initially, and then we will have take a couple minutes to answer a question. And Chris will be giving the timekeeper tonight. So we have three candidates tonight for the Finneytown school system. Let's see, Chad at the end, Cindy, and Steve. And I will just hand the microphone to Steve first, and you guys just hand it down.
Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Steve Stuhlreier, and I'm a 12-year resident here in Springfield Township. I also have 3 kids in the Finneytown School District, a 5th grader, an 8th grader, and 11th grader. I own a company which I started in 2012 here, and it's located in the Springfield Township area, right down the street behind Brentwood Printing. The name of the company is Restoring Hope Counseling and Coaching. I'm a licensed mental health and addictions therapist, and have about 9 other people working with me down at our company. So, I feel very strongly about what the board does, and have been attending board meetings for about 2 years now, asking questions of the board and interacting with the board fairly frequently, I guess, and generally interested in, primarily because my kids are in the school district, really interested in trying to help the school district take the next step forward. If for no other reason for my own kids, but certainly for all the kids in the school district. And I look forward to the time on the school board. Thank you. There we go.
Same old Mike. All right, I'm Cindy Redmond. I am serving my 2nd term on your school board. And basically, my husband and I lived in Finneytown since 1986. Both of our boys graduated from Finneytown in 09 and 07. And my older son has a home here in Finneytown, and he has had my first grandchild. So if I'm tired, it's because the little guy has arrived. So I have been over there helping them out. So clearly, I'm very invested in Finneytown. I've been here 31 years. I have encouraged my son to buy his home here and obviously raise his son here. Currently, there's a lot of things going on, and we would really like you, if you have not yet responded to the survey, to do so. You should have gotten one of these cards at home. Make sure you take care of this, because we want to hear from everybody from all the different categories. We don't want to hear from the same old that we always do. So take a few minutes to do that for us.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me? It's
Yeah.
very odd to have the PA set up like this. I'd like to thank everyone tonight for coming out. I'd like to thank the Finneytown Civic Association for giving us the opportunity to speak in front of you tonight. And a little background on myself. I've been a resident of Finneytown since 2013. I have 2 children in the school district. Madeline is in 3rd grade at Whitaker, and Benjamin is in 1st grade at Brent. I grew up in the Cincinnati Public School District. I attended Linwood Fundamental Academy for primary school, and then for junior high and senior high, I attended Walnut Hills High School, graduating in 1995. After Walnut Hills High School, I attended the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music with an emphasis in theater design and production. I work for a company south of Dayton called Scenic Solutions, and we fabricate theatrical scenery for the entertainment industry. I'm a firm believer that you can't just sit by and watch others lead as the world unfolds around you. I feel everyone has a part to play, everyone has a way that they can contribute. Sometimes it's difficult to find that way you need to contribute for yourself. For quite some time, I've been looking for what I can do. When Laura and I first moved into Finneytown, I started to attend the Springfield Township trustee meetings, and I felt that that could be a place I could get involved in. I started serving on the Neighborhood Master Planning Committee, and I said, Springfield Township is where I need to be. Then, as he just said, 30 seconds left, something happened. My daughter went to kindergarten, and I got introduced to our school district, and I fell in love with our school district. I started attending PTA meetings, I started volunteering with After Prom, going to school functions, and I decided after a while that I was feeling called to run for the board.
To be continued.
So to be continued. Thank you, guys. So that was a good spot. What's your name?
Chad Engelman.
Chad Engelman.
Question from the floor. Does the school district need a new building or buildings? If yes, how would you convince district voters to raise taxes to support this? Steve,
That's a better setup. So does the district need new school buildings? I would have to say yes. I think the school buildings are very, very old. Some of them don't have any air conditioning in them. And so I think the quick answer is the school district does need new buildings. How do we, as a school board try to convince the community to support a tax increase? That's a very difficult question. As a resident in the Springfield Township, I would not want to raise taxes if I didn't have to in order to provide new buildings. There comes a time when we have to assess the pros and cons, the risks and the disadvantages of doing something like that. So I think we would, what I would push for as a board member is to invite the community into these meetings and for the community to discuss their concerns with us. And the board, then I would encourage the board, which I think they do currently as well, to listen to what the community has to say and have a conversation with them, with the community members, so that we can kind of come to a common ground.
We actually have a unique opportunity right now to get new buildings because we have qualified for state funding, and they will pay 46% of new buildings. So to me, it's like a 50-year opportunity, because if we don't accept this, we go back to the back of the line. We spend a great deal of our operational funds on maintaining our old buildings, and it's not, in the long term, getting us new buildings. I personally feel we'd be better off to spend the money on new buildings, and in 10 years, we'd have at least 10-year-old buildings instead of 60-year-old buildings. So I would say we definitely need new buildings. Obviously, no one wants to pay new taxes. I don't want to pay more taxes. All you got to do is look at the size of my home to know that I'm not a wealthy individual. You know, if I could afford a much larger house payment, I'd have a much larger home. So, you know, sometimes you have to look at how long do you put money into the old car, the old house, the old school building? When does it become time to replace that building?
And I as well agree that we do need new school buildings. And the easiest way to prove to the community that we need school buildings is to invite the community into the buildings and see what the current condition of the buildings are. The current condition of the buildings is not something that we should feel proud of for our children going through our school district. As Cindy says, we are in a great time where the state's going to contribute a significant amount of money for our buildings. It's been 50 years since we built buildings. We have the state getting ready to contribute almost 50% to build the new buildings. And we need to move forward in making our buildings more economical, more efficient. Currently, we're paying for 3 cafeterias. We're paying for 3 libraries. We're paying for 3 administrative offices. There's 1 in each building. We can consolidate some of those expenses, which gets our day-to-day operations down. And in the long run, that will save the community money on operating expenses. It's going to be difficult, and it's going to be painful for everyone in this room to have to make a choice to say, yes, I need to spend more money on our schools. I personally would prefer not to. It's money that comes out of the budget, and I have to say, where's that money going to come from? I'm magically not going to get a raise to cover this tax increase. But I think as a community, we need to take care of our children. I think taking care of our children will take care of the community in reverse.
Thank you, Chad. Recently, we've had a 2016-17 report card for Finneytown Local School District, and there are 6 component grades: 1B, 1C, 2 Ds, 2 Fs. What will you do to improve these grades?
As a board member, I need to support the teachers, the superintendent, the administration, in making sure they have what they need to do their jobs. And to me, education starts at the home and the family. It is my responsibility to educate my children. A part of my responsibility is I send my children to schools, and they're doing a portion of the education, and I'm taking on a portion of the education at home. To me, we need to make sure our community knows that parents need to be involved with the education of their children. It is a daycare. Parents need to take an active role. And the more parents take an active role in it, the more the teachers at Finneytown, our employees, will be able to educate our children better, and our test scores will be able to go up. I don't necessarily feel that the test scores are an accurate representation of our school district. There's a lot of politics that go into these test scores. As not being on the board, I'm not associated, and I don't see those now. But my gut tells me there's a lot of school districts that can put money and effort into making themselves look better on these test scores. I want the test scores to go up. We need to facilitate the teachers and make sure they have everything they need to educate our children.
The tests are really not as important to me as whether or not we are increasing our students' abilities and their skills, and we are doing that. Part of the issue with the testing is that it changes every year. They change the bar, so even when our kids improve and do better, it doesn't necessarily show because they've raised the level to be called proficient or, particularly good at things. You can't just go by the test unless you do a great deal of homework to understand how the testing changes each year and why it's like we're chasing something that never stops. We're chasing something that never stops changing, and you can't keep up with it because you don't know what they're going to do for the next year. Our students are growing, our students are learning, and we have a lot of students who have a number of issues that we are making sure we take care of. Because a student who's worried about something going on at home is not going to learn. The student who comes to school hungry is not going to learn. And back to the building, students who are sweating are not going to learn. So you have to think about all the needs of the child and not simply what that test says on that day. I myself had a son who did not do well on the testing, and a lot of it came down to, for one, in those days they had the writing test, and his handwriting was ridiculous. So as soon as they would look at that sheet that he wrote on, he would lose points because they couldn't read what he wrote. And I knew that wasn't an honest statement of how he did on that test.
I would agree with mostly what Chad and Cindy said. I would say in addition to that, I think we need leadership. Part of what I do in my company is I teach transformational leadership to people where I teach, and my company teaches values and integrity and strategic planning, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the school district has some of that, but you can always be better at leadership. I also think as a school board member, it's my obligation and our obligation also to represent the people of the district to the state to talk to the state representatives on the education committee and say, hey, this is a problem for our school district, many school districts like us, where you keep shifting the standards around. I have met with Cecil Thomas, who was on the education committee, and he voiced frustrations as well, requesting school board members from not just Finneytown, but all over the state to contact them about these kinds of issues. He's very aware of the issues, but there's a lot more influence if the state representatives are hearing from school board members and the people in the community. I think it's also partly the responsibility of the people in the community. So I think that's one thing that we would do. Another thing that I would suggest is Finneytown School District recently implemented the house system, which in principle I think is a fantastic idea. Yet the kids are missing out on about an hour and 45 minutes of school a week. There's a lot of off days in addition to that, and so there's a lot more time with kids out of the class than achieving being taught academics and achieving that way. So those are a couple things in 2 minutes or less. I was able to maybe share some other ideas as well that when I'm on the school board will hopefully be able to offer to the school district and the community.
80% of the families here in Finneytown do not have a child in the Finneytown school system. We have a lot of people in the neighborhood that really aren't attached to the community or to the school anymore. How do you plan on maybe making it a little bit better inclusion or participation or information to the community from the school board's point of view?
Thank you. So that's been a frustration of mine and a concern of mine as a non-board member for the last several years, and I think the school board as well concerned about the interaction. I don't know if concern is the right word, but aware of the lack of interaction with the community with the school board. I've been attending for about 2 years now, and there's typically 3 or 4 parents, the same 3 or 4 parents coming. So one of my concerns is to try to help people understand that their property values are related to how well the school district is doing. And we want to hear from everybody. We want everybody's input into how the school district is going to run. There's a lot of talent in our community. We would want people to be involved with some of the decision-making processes over the next 4 years or so, at least my first term. So that's one of the things I would suggest is, and the school board, I would suggest also for the school board to find other ways in addition to what the school board's already doing to initiate conversation with the community, just to get people involved. I think community involvement would be the #1 impetus towards a healthier school district.
I too fell into the group that got away from the school. When my younger son graduated in '09, and I was not on the board for 4 years, I kind of disappeared. And I didn't choose to pursue information about the school district until I came back around from what I was occupied with, and then went and sought out information, and here I am back on the school board. I don't know that you can always get people to be interested in something. I think we certainly make a lot of efforts between having things on the website and mailings that we've attempted. The problem with the mailings is they're expensive, and people complain that we're spending money on mailings. So, and I'm not sure how many people read what we send through the mail. So hopefully we can reach out more to the churches. We're making more connections to the churches. We're trying, again, fill in your survey. There's lots of ways to get involved. We have a number of subcommittees that are looking for members, and we'd love to have a more well-rounded voice from the community. I know I had other things I was doing. I was occupied, and I don't know that everyone who's not involved would necessarily give up the time because maybe they're doing something else with their time. But certainly, if you have some ideas, I'm all ears.
So yes, 80% of Finneytown does not have children in the school district. And there's going to be a good chance over the next year that we're going to go to the ballot and ask for money to build new school buildings. So the question I have to the 80% of Finneytown, what do you need in a public building? because we are going to build a public building. The building is going to be owned by the Finneytown. We're going to do something with public money. So I think we should say to the community, the people in this room, what do you need in a building? Let's think outside the box. What does the community need in a facility that will be used to educate children during the day? Can it have an evening function? Can it have a weekend function? Can it have a Sunday function? There are many opportunities out there that we can explore to take the money we're going to spend on a new school building and turn it into something for the community, something to give back to the community. What does the community want? And the community needs to be involved in the conversation. There are all kinds of ideas. There are pros and cons to ideas. I've heard examples of having a public library built into a school district that has successfully happened. I have seen ideas of a health clinic being built into a school district. I have seen ideas of public spaces you can rent to do parties or yoga classes being incorporated into a school building. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating for any of those three, but the conversation needs to be happening. What does the community need? Yes, 80% of us in this community don't have children in school. But anywhere you live, you have to support the public schools. If you move to Westchester, if you move to Loveland, if you move anywhere, you still have to support the public schools wherever you live. And then my question to the community is what do you want to get out of this building? What can we do to incorporate it, to make it a community building, not just a building that's being used for education?
That's a very good question. Student population is, what, around 1,400?
Almost 15.
How much?
Almost 15.
Almost 15. Some concern about open enrollment, maybe needing to have some population. Should Finneytown adopt open enrollment? Why or why not?
Open enrollment, as an incoming board member, is going to be one of the first things. I need to reach out to the experts and have the experts pitch to me the pros and cons of open enrollment. I don't necessarily have an opinion sitting here right now with my education level on open enrollment. I don't think we necessarily need more children in the school district. I'm not sure what the end goal of having more children would be in the school district. I'm not sure, I think having more children would be good, but I'm not sure why we need to strive to have more children in the school district. Open enrollment has pros and cons. I've heard people talk about the pros, I've heard people talk about the cons, but I think we need to have a researchable discussion on open enrollment. We can have it in the public, and we need to get people who can come in and talk to the community and show us the pros and cons and examples of the pros and cons so that the community can actually make a decision instead of hearing the magical, well, we need to do open enrollment to get more students. Our facilities can handle the amount of students we have now. And my question to everyone is, I'm not sure that the push just to get more students is something that we need to be doing at this point.
In the past, when we've discussed open enrollment, the majority of folks that we heard from, yet again, were against open enrollment because they feel that if you want to attend Finneytown schools, you want to have those folks paying the property taxes for Finneytown schools. I don't know if the community's opinion on that has changed. A lot of districts now have open enrollment around us, and we actually lose some students to open enrollment in other places, whether it's because they think the sports teams are better or something that suits their child better is available at that school. I think that people tend to go where they believe their child will be best served. Now, whether that's by choosing to live here and go to open enrollment somewhere else, or to live somewhere else and go to open enrollment in yet a third location. I don't know that open enrollment is going to change the big picture. We've been about 1,500 kids for several years now. If we build new buildings, it will be based on a projection that is based on our history of enrollment, and therefore, potentially, if you increased your student population by a great deal, we could outgrow our new buildings very quickly, because they will be based on our history and what our tendency of student enrollment was. So I don't know that this is a good time necessarily to address open enrollment and potentially have a big jump in students when the projections won't match what could potentially happen. I can be convinced one way or the other if I'm given new information that shows that there are more pros than cons. In the past, there were more cons, according to our community.
I, like Chad, would have to say I would need to wait to see more information, more data, talk to more experts about open enrollment. I can tell you that that I grew up in Green Hills right up the street and went through the Green Hills Forest Park School District from kindergarten through high school. And so when my wife and I, were eventually married, moved about 4 hours away, then came back about 12 years ago, we were looking to move back into that school district and decided not to. We were looking to move back into Green Hills because as a parent, Green Hills potentially is a great place to raise your kids, and chose not to go there because of the school district. And so I think the school district is hugely important. One of the things I think about as a business owner is how can I attract more customers, if you will, by providing better services and doing better at what we do. And I think the answer about open enrollment is not a standalone answer. I think it's tied into the report card. I think it's tied into a whole number of things that we would want to consider. If all things being equal, I think we would want to look at, are we providing great services at all levels to our quote-unquote customers? And I think if the goal of open enrollment is to increase enrollment, then perhaps a better way is to provide great services so when people are looking to move into a community, either Finneytown, the Springfield Township, or any of the surrounding communities, they choose this community because the school district is so good. So personally, I would push more for how do we figure out how to provide great services across the board, not just on the state report card, but again, across the board so that people would want to choose Finneytown versus another community.
Kind of a corollary to that last question, what is the tipping point when the Finneytown Local School District decides it has no option but to consolidate? What is the tipping point?
I have no idea. Just to be honest with you. I would be I would stand very strongly against consolidation. There would have to be a huge argument for it, and then even then I may not. It would depend on what the argument is, first of all, and what would make sense. I guess I do have an opinion. I said I don't have an opinion. I guess my opinion is there would have to be some extremely convincing evidence that that's the best thing for our kids in the long run. Then we'd have to look at who are we going to consolidate with, and do we want to consolidate with that community or not? I think there's many variables to consider, and so that I think instead of giving out any detailed answer, we could wait until if that ever came up. I've never heard it come up until you just asked that question. But it would have to be, one of the reasons why we moved into the Finneytown area was because the school district reminded me of the Green Hills Forest Park School District, where I went to Green Hills. It was a small community, get to know the teachers, get to know the administrators, get to know people, and that's what's happened. And to create a super school, if you will, would be very scary to send our kids to a place where they could be lost as just another number in the school district.
I actually tend to agree that consolidation was not necessarily a good thing for Finneytown. People choose Finneytown for a number of reasons, and small is frequently one of them. Having your student in a building where all the teachers know his name is a huge influence on how he does everything every day, because he has the potential of knowing that, oh, I might have that teacher next year, so I better behave because they know everyone. And I don't imagine that some of the people who choose to be here now, when we're small, would choose to remain if we consolidated. Then, of course, when this has been discussed in the past, there's always the issue of who do you join up with? There are a lot of communities around us that might be happy to consolidate with us, and then there are those that we would love to consolidate with who would not be so happy to have us. So we have to be honest with ourselves about what's the real possibility here, and are we going to be better by doing so? Now, there's been talk in the state for many years about consolidating school districts, and some of that has occurred. But I guess I'm going to wait till they make us do it.
I'd have to agree with Cindy and Steve. I cannot, to answer the question, what would be the tipping point? I have no clue. I can't imagine any of us voting or to consolidate with another school district. We would lose everything that we have that is great about our school district. We have with 1,500 kids in our complete district, we're small enough that we have access to our superintendent. You guys have access to your board members. When I went to Cincinnati Public growing up, Walnut Hills had 3,500 kids in the building every day, and there was 40,000 kids in the school district, and you can't even find a board member in Cincinnati Public. You don't even know how to get to them. I think in order for us to consolidate, we would have to choose to consolidate, and I can't see anyone in this room choosing to consolidate, because we would still have to pay the property tax to educate our children. It would just go to a different entity. And why would we want to give up the access of having our own school district with our own control over it? So to answer the question, I guess the only tipping point would be us being forced to. And I have absolutely no idea why we would ever be forced to consolidate.
I've got time for one more question, I believe. This is a pretty long-term question. What are the 2 or 3 most important challenges currently facing the district?
We've talked about one of the biggest challenges facing the district right now, and that is our school buildings. And not to hit the hammer on it again. Our buildings are important, and to me, one of the things that I think is really important for our school district is our school district does not have preschool at this point in time. Now, we're not required to have preschool by law, but there are a lot of school districts who are moving to including preschool into the education. And I think preschool is absolutely important for the education of our children. Absolutely important. There are some schools that parents sleep in tents for days to get their children into preschools. They feel it's so important. And if we do move on to considering facilities, I'm going to make sure that preschool is in every plan, because in order to have a preschool in a school district, there's a lot of specific facilities you need to have. There's rules and regulations on the little ones. They have to have separate entrances and separate laws. And I think if we moved to having preschool for Finneytown students, that's a part of the education, that's going to help the district a lot.
I think the most important issue we're facing is that we have so many kids with so much need. And while we're replacing families in a very broad way, and lots of people from different backgrounds and different income levels, I don't know if it's a national thing societal-wise, but we seem to have more students with more needs. And I don't think it's just here. I mean, I work in another district and I see lots of kids with needs there. I work with those kids. So I understand that you can't necessarily keep from getting them. But we also have to be careful not to get to the point where we have so many kids with needs that the families who can do a little extra or afford to support things choose to leave because they no longer have enough folks like them who can help. So, and I think this gets back to the new buildings. If you have buildings that do not attract families who have a choice, then eventually you get to where the only folks you have coming are those who will tolerate the buildings because they believe the education is worth it. We need to start drawing more families who have a choice and they want both the education and the huge diversity we have, and they like our buildings. Okay? You need all of that to bring in people who have a choice. My sons went to completely different types of universities, and they both did wonderfully there because they were exposed to so many different kinds of people in Finneytown. So there was no one new to see. Well, maybe someone who spoke a foreign language for the one. But, you know, there's so much to be said for having that diversity, whether it's economic or racial or what kind of jobs they have, more blue collar, more white collar. All that's important for a kid in today's world. You know, 85% of students attend public schools. When you get a job, you're going to be working with kids from public schools. So you need to be able to get along with lots of kind of people. And I think it's wonderful to have the diversity, but we got to make sure we don't get so far that we're exhausting the folks who can do a little extra.
So I'd say there's 2 things that I think are very, very important for the school district currently, perhaps in addition to the buildings. One is as a business owner, I on a daily, weekly, certainly monthly basis look at my business finances very frequently because that helps me navigate from point A to point B, if you will. And so one of the concerns I have, and I've expressed to the board over the last couple of years, is the school finances. Last year, about this time, we got the 5-year forecast, and the school district was projected to be $4.8 million in the hole in 5 years. Now, a lot of that, I think, has been being fixed or corrected primarily because the transportation department changed to contracting with Peterman, and there's been money saved there, there's been money saved here. That can only go on for so long. And my understanding is, at least from the last financial report, things were looking better than they were several months ago, or even 6 months ago. So I think one of the concerns that I would have is the school finances and staying on top of it, so we don't get to the place where we have to relieve the school district or staff of their jobs, if you will, to maintain the financial health of the district. The other concern I would have is simply the academics. As was pointed out, the state report card grades, and there's reason for that, but again, with the house system, which I'm supportive of that principle of, which is really in place to try to build community in the school district, unfortunately what it does is it takes kids away from academics, at least about an hour and 45 minutes a week, according to my junior-aged daughter. And that's time taken away from education, which is the focus of the school. With Cindy saying, and I would agree with her, there are people in the school district that have a lot of needs, and I'm a mental health and addictions therapist. And so there's a lot of need to help them, but we can get off track so easy to be helping them, and we get our focus off of the thing, off of the academics, which is why the school district exists in the first place.
Thank you, Steve, Cindy, and Chad for a very thoughtful event tonight, and we look forward to